What's up, Uncut listeners? I got my guy Troy on here with me. It's your host, Jay. We're going to get into a couple topics. Say something to the people, though. You want to promote any your social media and stuff real quick before we get into it, though, G?
Hey, y'all can find me on social media, Troy Hud. Instagram and SoundCloud is Veritas, Veritas. Get at me, boost them socials. I like to discuss, so if y'all want to shoot a message, I'm free to talk.
Yes, sir. Y'all know where to find me at O_AEKOOS on the gram, man. Sorry, I'm fucking up a little bit. I'm a little tired, a little distracted. But with all that being said, man, let's get to it. So, you wanted to talk about kind of the political shit going on and some of the stuff in music. So I'm very curious about your perspective to kick it off. How do you feel like music has affected like the BLM movement and things like that? How do you feel like music has affected that?
I'm gonna say right now, as far as from what I've heard, it's been a positive message going out.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really heard too many people like really going on the other end of the spectrum. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I like touch on Lil Baby. He been dropping some heat here recently, getting into more of a bar style that we ain't used to. He kind of transitioning into an artist. It's good to see that type of thing. And I'll be honest, another person I've been watching here pretty closely is YouTube rapper Dax. He been touching on some controversial things, and I feel like, to wrap it all into the political side, you got these people, that obviously want their voice heard. It's been long enough. I mean, we've been dealing with these issues as a society since our birth, of a nation.
Right.
So we gotta figure something out, and the only way is gonna be to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people want to avoid these conversations because they uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying?
Very true.
And I feel like we gotta break it down and really get to the root of the problem and be able to see eye to eye.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, do you think that it's a great thing? Because before, like guys like Tupac and there were other artists that were taking like a political stance in a sense. So I'm curious, do you think that this is great that we have more music than people who, should be speaking? You know what I'm saying? We don't have like an MLK in our era. We don't have a Malcolm X. So what do you feel about the musicians and the entertainers being the more, I mean, there's always been entertainers, but what do you feel about like the basketball players and the musicians being the more impactful ones on the movement? What do you feel about that?
I think it's a lot more in our face nowadays.
Yeah.
And those are, big influencers of today's society, being that we live in a social media age, everything gets recorded. You got to mind your P's and Q's when you're speaking,
Right.
and all that stuff, So I think a lot of that comes from, just everything being on camera nowadays, and now we have the ability to share ideas with people all across the United States and the world. You know what I mean? And I think we see a lot of that from the world support that Black Lives Matter has garnered. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, to wrap it back around to the athletes and influencers, entertainers, stuff like that, I feel like, it's not their responsibility, but at the same token, they do have an influence over, a group of people. People do look up to them. They all, not necessarily role models, but the people that society looks up to. They got a lot of money. They're successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to take all those things into account. With that being said, also, I feel like, the cancel culture that's coming along now, people having to pay for past remarks or ideals that they hold, I feel like that could be a very dangerous thing as well as a very good thing,
Yeah, no,
because we've seen how media spews things,
Very true. It's very manipulative, and I'm glad that you brought up the cancel culture, because while there are people that, deserve it, you know what I mean? Because you do have to have a sense of accountability. I don't like that we hold more accountability to these entertainers than these politicians and things like that. The people who we know for a fact are crooked across the board. You know what I mean? Like,
Agreed.
Right now, we in probably one of the worst positions ever. We have to choose between literally two fucking perverts being in office. You can go with this guy who talks about sleeping with his daughter, or someone who has a story. It's disgusting. It's sad how we're being represented right now, and I think our best bet is these musicians, these the football players, the hoopers, all that type of shit. I think it's great that a lot of them are being more responsive and more receptive to the message and things like that. I don't like
Agreed,
though
agreed.
the BLM. I feel like the BLM movement, to me personally, it is losing steam because of shit like the NBA season returning. Because now it's given not even just white people, because there was a lot of black people that's a part of the problem too. It's a lot of Uncle Ruckus motherfuckers out here, whether people want to accept it or not. And I feel
Right,
like
right.
with sports coming back, it's giving people a safe place to hide. It's taken too much of our attention off of the issue. I feel like the BLM, movement is losing way too much steam. I'm very curious to see how it picks back up in the fall, and in the coming months with the NBA season getting ready to close back out. I don't know if the NFL season is going to be garnering as much attention as before, anything like that. But I'm curious to see your perspective now on how you think all this shit coming back is distracting us, because to me that's just what it is, nothing more than a distraction.
Okay, I'm gonna take it piece by piece here. All right, I'm gonna bring a little history into it.
Right.
As a democracy, where there was one standing democracy that really stood out, that paralleled the United States, and that was ancient Rome. Okay, now in Rome, they had a Senate. They had the same problems we face today as far as greed within politicians and greed within powers of institutions. Okay, now, how did they control the mass? What did they say was their controlling factor of the mass's mind? What did they have? They had the Colosseum. And that was their version of sports back then.
Yeah, entertainment.
You know what I mean? So we could tie that in, to football, basketball, soccer, all the things that we have now are at our disposal, that take up a good chunk of our day. You watch a basketball game, you watch a football game, that's, 2-3 hours of your time, and you focused on something that is entertainment based. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not fueling you other than entertainment. And I feel like that kind of brings a disconnect in society, right? Because everybody's in their house. People go out to bars, people watch sports, hang out with their friends, have parties, all that stuff. But with this COVID being here, you know what I'm saying? More people are isolating themselves, okay? So now we got this disconnect between people, right? And when you have that disconnect, well, we're going to focus on the things that keep us divided, because that's the easy thing to do, right? I mean, how hard is it to be like, I don't like him, I don't like her, you know what I mean? And based off of, things that are out of people's control, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's the current state of where we are today as America. We have a movement that obviously has been a long time coming. There's been movements similar to it that in history they've told us that this is all gone away and this doesn't exist no more, and it was kind of swept under the rug for, I'd say since the Rodney King riots, back in the 90s.
Very true.
So I feel like, we got to take a step back, as the people, and realize what power we hold. And I think we're seeing that, in these protests that are popping up across the nation and around the world. We're seeing that we hold a lot of power, right?
Very true.
Things are getting done. Everybody wants to say, well, protests don't work. Well, hey, protests are getting things accomplished. Look throughout our history. Protests have gotten things accomplished. Look at, women's voting rights. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Look at the civil rights movement. Protests accomplish things. So I think we need to come together and find a general consensus for how to move forward. And I feel like a lot of people agree, being on, the side of, I'm on, being a white male, in today's day and age. It's very interesting to be able to detach completely from everything and see both sides, okay?
Right.
Now, there's a lot of people that grew up with hatred in their heart. They were taught this hate, okay, from a very young age. And I feel like that's also kind of what we're dealing with, these cartoons, and stuff that kids are being force-fed nowadays.
Yeah.
It's programming, essentially. Think about how malleable a human brain is when it's not fully grown, So I think we have to really take a look within ourselves and find the love within ourselves in order to branch that out and start repairing what has been going on for, 300-400 years, and even before that. You know what I mean? So I think that's a big thing, and a lot of people don't understand what America was built on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing that is uncomfortable to talk about,
Yeah.
Being a history buff, you read a lot of things and you encounter a lot of things that leave a lot of questions. So when it gets to the point of America, we were a bunch of thieves, criminals coming over from Great Britain.
Yeah.
And we built our nation on the back of the genocide of a race and the enslavement of another.
That's true. Wow. So and I think, so going back to, because you made a great point about connectivity, right? There's a disconnect, and then there's also people that are very connected. Like you said, there's a lot of, I think we have now more resources because of the growth of technology and things like that. And so it allows for the conversation to now have more impact and reach more people and things like that. So I like the outreach of it. But again, I do feel like things have gotten gradually back, to how they were a year ago. You know what I mean? Like, people have lost steam. Like, I didn't get into shit, it was a guy that I was cool with, you know what I'm saying, earlier in high school. He got on Facebook, talking a little crazy, being a little disrespectful. I had to remove myself from it, you know what I mean? And I can just see now how people were connected before versus, like, you know what I'm saying? Now it's just like, oh, I don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like, now you can kind of see where people's energy have changed and things like that. Where we were progressive, now we're not so progressive. You know what I'm saying? People will just talk crazy, do whatever. And I think it's just more difficult now through hard times because there are more people who are ignorant, people who are careless, people don't have the clear state of mind. They don't have the right intentions. See, what you were saying earlier and what you were addressing with the wrong thing is, like you said, you're a history buff. So you empower yourself with knowledge and things like that. I think that people, when they have mixed intentions or they have a fucked up heart type shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's when the message gets fucked up. Case in point with the BLM thing. It became BLM versus All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. It became clouded with bullshit because people's intentions weren't in the right place. Because if your intentions were good, you could not misunderstand the message. It's like when people were like, oh, the rioters are causing problems, but that wasn't the riot. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That was rioters, but there's a difference between rioting and peaceful protest. When the peaceful protest went bad is when we were attacked and things like that. I had people at the protest up here in Maryland getting tear gas and things like that when Trump pulled his little bullshit, you know what I'm saying? Up in D.C. So it's just very interesting to see how people have changed so quickly in a short period of time, how the movement has lost steam. But again, I think that's a great point about connectivity. And I think it's also a great thing that, a lot of white people are starting to disconnect, not from their culture, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they're starting to see things from the other side of the table. You get what I'm saying? Like, I think that's led to a lot of momentum with this thing going forward.
And I think, that also stems from it's getting a lot harder to hide these things. You know what I mean? We live in the day and age of information, So a lot of these things that were once brushed under the rug and you had to have a solid education or a solid, truth-seeking mentality to go out and find these things, they weren't readily available. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So now that we live in this day and age where there's, government documents getting leaked, we're learning about history they lied to us about, going back, and finding out the CIA was behind the assassination of Martin Luther King, you really start to question the intent of our government. And I believe that, we forfeited a democracy a long time ago. Okay. A lot of people don't see the United States as this great beacon of freedom as it once was. Okay. And I don't believe it ever was, because if you really look at our history, that's kind of self-explanatory. But I'm going to take a step back even further, and break it down to the people in power. Okay. So we have a shadow government, you as well as me know that the president is a figurehead for the people pulling the strings, right? So we look at Congress. We look at, the Senate. Okay, in Congress, you have people that have been in a seat for 40 to 50 years, career politicians.
Yeah.
Bringing in millions of dollars a year off of politics. Okay. Now, these donors, people that go and lobby these politicians, that's legal bribery. Nobody's gonna go and say, "Hey, here's $1 million. I support your campaign." No, that $1 million is here's $1 million. I'm supporting your campaign, and I need you to do me a favor after you get in office.
That's okay. A great way to break it down. Go ahead though. You're saying?
Yeah, and then we move a little forward. Okay, let's move a little forward and bring it up to let's really start at Reagan. Okay, back in the 70s, with the demonization of marijuana and the drug war.
Okay.
Now, what was that drug war's main intent, and what else came about in that time era? The drug war's main intent was to incarcerate people. Okay, that was the beginning of the private prison industry, right? Back in the 70s. Now you have a profit motive for incarceration. No matter what the crime rate is, they have a certain occupancy in these jails they have to fill. So now you have a drug on the street that's been made illegal, that grows in your backyard. Check this out. They can't tax it, right? So now you put a profit motive on selling that drug and make it, admirable thing to look at in order of, income. Let's say if you're in an area, you had problems with the law before, you're a felon, right? You can't get a job. Getting a job's hard. You got to feed your family. One way or another, when it comes down to it, a lot of people haven't been on that side, so they don't understand. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's where a lot of this comes from, is not being able to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Okay? But I got away from my point. I'm sorry about that. Kind of rambling. But to get back to the point of incarceration, so these things were placed strategically in certain places of the United States. Right? Let's look at, the 80s when they were funneling drugs or funneling goods to the cartels in exchange for drugs. CIA got busted for doing that in the 80s and early 90s. And let's look at how closely the CIA was working with the Bloods and Crips in the early 90s, all the way up until the colors were united. And then what happened? Colors got united, and there was a hit on a Blood, I believe, and that ended the peace treaty.
That's right. It was the leader of the Bloods, exactly.
How do you fight something you can't see divided? That's just because we can't see it, touch it, feel it, doesn't mean it's not there. We've seen that for the greater part of my life. I can speak for myself. I've been here 25 years. For the greater part of my life, I've seen these things, within my family. I've seen these things within close friends of family. And it really enraged me at a young age, because I was born and raised to treat everyone with respect.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he was a janitor or a CEO. I'm going to treat you with the same level of energy you're giving me. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? And I think if we, realize what's important in life and realize that we're all in this shit together, then that's when the real change will be made. We might not have to like one another. That's cool. You don't have to like everybody. That's the beauty of being American, right? But at the end of the day, respect needs to be kept.
Very true.
Regardless of personal feeling.
Absolutely. And that just reflects and kind of demonstrates the point of what I was just saying, kind of like with a little incident that I had to deal with earlier. You know what I mean? It's as long as you're respectful, I think that that's one of the key points in the solution, right? Because even with like what we're talking about, a lot of people on both sides, whether you be black, white, you can be mixed, of Latin descent or whatever the case may be. Part of
Yes, sir.
one of the key parts of the problem is that people are wanting to talk about it but aren't receptive to the information that they're getting back. It's almost like when someone white is telling you, oh, as long as you be quiet and do what they say, they won't shoot you. Well, that's bullshit. We've seen demonstrations of that, and people that are innocent getting beat up, shot, whatever the case may be.
Nah,
You know what I mean?
the
So,
one that's biggest in the news, Breonna Taylor. Homegirl
exactly.
was sleeping in her house. You
Yeah.
know.
And this is not the first time. It was another. It was a young male in Texas, I believe it was. He had a red doormat, and a female officer goes into his house and shoots him. So it's not the
Yup, his
first time we
neighbor,
saw that.
correct? That was his
Exactly.
neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. She didn't know that it was his house or some shit like that, but there was a key identifying mark, which happened to be the red doormat. So you just see a lack of accountability on these different parts. And just like we were talking about the history, you have to understand where these things come from. So even though we're giving you guys the information on this history, you all have to do your research because there's a truth in it that we might overlook, but you might find. Things like that. So you
Agreed.
should all fact
Everybody
check.
got a piece of the puzzle. Everybody
Absolutely.
got it.
But as for the politicians and things like that, it's one of my favorite movies because it's so many notions. Like I went back and watched it about a month ago, and it had so many things that were relatable to these times now. And in V for Vendetta, V was saying, the people should not be afraid of the government. The government should be afraid of the people. Our power is with us, but we give it to these politicians and things like that. The title, like you said, it's a title game, right? So the president doesn't actually have all the power. By title, he's the most powerful man in the world, essentially, right? But that is not
Right.
the case. Again, it comes down to Congress, to Senate. They're the one pushing the laws. They're the one doing things. He can be vetoed at any point in time on, whatever kind of bullshit. You know what I'm saying? So we have to look at who does what. I don't like the fact that, again, that you have, like you said, career politicians, people that have been in positions of power for 40 to 50 years, because a lot of people don't understand, even with like how the Republican Party and the Democratic Party was founded. A lot of people think the Democratic Party, and I talk to people about this all the time as well. It doesn't come down to, it shouldn't be Democratic or Republican. There are some good people that are Republican. Again, your political party that you're affiliated with is typically based on the family that you were born into. So, me being black, I was born into a primarily Democratic family. Somebody who's white might be primarily born into a Republican family. But even with that, do your research on that. A lot of people are under a lot of black people especially are under the notion that the Democratic Party is the good party. A lot of people don't know. The history of the Democratic Party was founded on a bunch of hateful, racist and depraved white people. The Republican Party was founded by 150 blacks. I think it was like 20 whites. And when the Republican Party started to gain power going up the East Coast, then the Democrats started to threaten their families and their businesses and things like that. And they started to target not the black people, but the white people. And so what ended up happening is these Democrats have now infiltrated the Republican Party by way of threats and things like that. And now both of the parties are now corrupted. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of
Yes,
people
sir.
complain about the Democrats being this way, but it's the Republicans too. It's corruption on both sides. And you talked about, a lot of people don't understand, again, how politics work. It's not about the agenda that you're trying to push forward, because again, if you're the president, you should represent the whole. It should be about progression and things like that, or getting to a place where we can say, we're all happy. We're all receiving what we deserve. But that's not the case. You have the Republicans pushing an agenda, and you have the Democrats pushing an agenda. But it stems back to the history of how things started and how it became corrupted decades ago. You know what I mean? And again, it's not. It's about what money you bring in, because you just said, like, it's with lobbyists and things like that. It's like you said, it's legal bribery. People don't understand. The best candidate isn't always the best candidate, because it's what kind of money are you able to generate? What are you able to bring to this party or this agenda? You know what I'm saying? What kind of favors can you do for me? If you give me enough backing, I'll give you enough money. You can do whatever with your campaign. You know what I mean? So again, people, you have to educate yourself on these things and be aware of what's going on, because it's somebody behind this is a puppet show. It's somebody in the back pulling the strings. The guy that you see in the front isn't the guy running everything. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. And I also like to speak on, while you're doing your research, one thing to pay attention to is the money trail. Now, there's a lot of things that can lie and be manipulated. That money don't lie. So keep an open mind when you're researching certain topics, and you don't necessarily have to agree with something to learn from it. So I would definitely recommend everybody to bone up a little bit on U.S. history, because I feel like we got to know where we've been in order to get to where we're going, and I feel like, education being defunded over all these years, education and history being changed in our textbooks, things being misrepresented for something that they aren't, okay? These are all things that have plagued, the youth and the people that are going to be in charge of everything in the years to come. And, I think a big thing that we need to focus on right now is, looking out for our neighbor, regardless of what qualms you might have, regardless of, what problems you might have, encountered in the past. Right. We live in a day and age where people are getting snatched off the street. Okay, little kids are going missing.
I'm glad you said that, because
black and white.
I'm glad you said that, because we definitely have to address this crap with this sex trafficking situation. It has gotten so out of control, and it's fucking disgusting. So I'm curious about how you feel about that and solutions towards that.
It's definitely gotten out of control, and like I said, it's something that's always been there, but the information was not readily available. Pizzagate's been a theory since the 90s, okay? Things are really starting to come to light, and a lot of the people that were working on bringing this information to light mysteriously, wound up dead by suicide. To touch on two of the people, Lincoln Park, Chester Bennington and his brother. A lot of people don't know Chester Bennington and his brother were relatives of a known pedophile. Their father was a known pedophile and occultist. Okay? They were speaking out against the shit they saw in their childhood, and were making an infomercial documentary, and mysteriously, were found, suicide. Okay? Now, I think we live in a time where people have a lot of power because we give power to this money, right? Right. As a society, we empower money. So therefore, if you have money, you have control. So when you really break it down, let's look at who's really controlling everything. Where does all this money come from? It's not like we live in the day of trading and, metals and things like that. Right. Let's look at the root of where the money's coming from. In the United States of America, it all comes through the Federal Reserve. And a lot of people, are confused on how the Federal Reserve works. Okay, so the Federal Reserve is basically like a private bank for the United States of America. It has no ties to the United States government. It's a central-run bank, meaning that the people that control this bank are somewhere else in the world. So now we have the primary money source for one of the biggest economies in the world being monopolized by a group of individuals. Okay, so our government and how we acquired our debt, everybody wants to talk about the $16 trillion of debt, right. Things to do to erase that. Okay, well, we have been printing money, essentially, with nothing to back it, right? So by printing all this money, we drive the price of everything up. That's where inflation comes in. Okay, because now we're putting more money supply in goods that are being traded. So, with that being said, the government needs a loan. They're short on money. They call up the Federal Reserve. They tell them how much money they need. Well, the Federal Reserve charges interest on the money that they print. And you see where all this is falling in the line now. Yeah. So it's going to get to a point where, we might have an economic disaster. I'm surprised COVID didn't do it. I've been watching the markets here recently. They're actually stabilizing a little bit with everything that's going on. So, I think people are, starting to spend money again. People are starting to come out and do things,
Yeah, and but that's where
we also are at a standstill with,
with the
who to support and who not to support. Because at this point in time, you have a lot of business owners that are voicing their opinions on social media, and it's losing their business, which it should, because honestly, if you got some hating ass shit to say,
Yeah.
or you feel some type of way about somebody, then maybe you should keep your comments to yourself,
Now
or
hold
you're
on.
going to suffer the consequences.
But with that point though, right? And I think they also have a valid point because it makes no sense that and this is how it works, right? The people with power, what do? They create more power for themselves. You know what I mean? So it's the notion of like, for example, right? A mom and pop store can go out of business very quickly in these kind of events, right? Where we've never experienced a pandemic, especially something like this. But even in an epidemic, something could go crazy. And I'm saying like you want to lose business because people are going to stay home. They're going to start buying
Right.
from these reliable, what we call reliable sources, regardless of how they treat their employees, whether it be like a Walmart or something like that. You're going to go to the more commercial places, the more popular places. And that's where these small, like again, the mom and pop businesses or the businesses that are now beginning to be born, they're getting fucked over. And the major corporations, the major brands, the major businesses, your Targets, your Walmarts, your Sam's Clubs, your Costco's, they aren't experiencing high tax prices, right? They're in the higher tax bracket, but they have all these things to call write-offs and things like that. And so now it's less money coming out of their pocket, but the people who have less, they're getting taxed at a larger percentage or larger rate. You see what I'm saying? So it's very unfair to them. So I get their perspective. Again, if you have some hate and shit and it's not progressive towards causing a solution, then I get it. But at the same time, I'm looking at it from their perspective as a business owner and things like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have people in my family right now trying to come up with different things like that and empower themselves and their brand. And I'm a part owner of a restaurant myself in the South. And I could tell you, it's a bunch of bullshit just in the way, and just how hard it is as a small business to get started. But it's even harder, for anybody middle class and down, as opposed to if you have a lot of money, it's super easy for you all the way through. You aren't going to lose shit because you have wealth. And people with power just get more power out of it. And I think it's fucked up. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I feel like we're seeing probably one of the biggest class gaps in history, as far as rich and poor. And I think, that's being systematically designed.
Yeah.
And do I believe that it's affecting, people differently? Yes, I do. There are things in place, and the more you educate yourself, and the more you read, and the more you're open to hearing information you might not agree with at first, the more you are able to empower yourself. And then by empowering yourself, knowledge is the most valuable thing we have in this world, so.
Yeah.
And with knowledge comes responsibility. What good is sitting on all this knowledge if you can't do nothing with it? So I feel like remain active, remain talking, keep bringing these difficult conversations up with your families, keep bringing these difficult conversations up with people you don't see eye to eye with, and respect, the outcome. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people aren't meant to partake on your journey with you, and you learn that through life as you start to elevate your own self, So I feel like, touching back on the class gap, we need to realize our power. And I think we as human beings, not only Americans, I'm talking about human beings as a whole, have gotten away from our own responsibilities. We've given a lot of power to these institutions for security, and for comfortability. Yeah. Whereas back in the day, we were policing ourselves. You know what I mean? We were growing our own food in our backyards. We were hunters, we were gatherers, so I feel like that plays a big part in how, society transformed as well. And we're relatively on the, second spectrum of technology. I mean, we were in horse and buggies 120 years ago. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think that has a big part to play with the ever-changing world we're living in.
Very true. Very true. Now, getting ready to wrap this up, but I also wanted to go back to what we were speaking towards initially, which is the music point and its impact on music. So I'm a very big fan of guys like J. Cole and Kendrick. Wale does an amazing job. Big fan of Vince Staples. He's also has some great political messages in his music, even though he makes like the fun stuff as well. I think it's a lot of people that have done a great job in pushing the culture forward. I think Meek Mill doing things with prison reform and things like that. I think even Trey Songz, he has been someone to be attacking like the racial issues and injustices going on through his Instagram and stuff lately. So I'm very happy and proud that a lot of people in our community, and not just in the black community, but there are a lot of amazing white people out there. There's a lot of people trying to push towards a solution from different cultures, different places. It's a beautiful thing, and
It really
I
is.
feel like the music and entertainment. Obviously, I mean, music is a part of entertainment, but the sports and things like that. While I'm grateful that it's bringing connectivity, the work is not done. But I'm very curious about now who you think has the most political influence from a music sense. Who do you feel like has generated the most interest, or just who's created the most vocal point going towards a solution?
There's a guy named Daylight. He's from Watts, California.
I love Daylight.
He's a battle rapper, man, and I tell you what, the things he's been able to accomplish within his own city, and also now branching outward, and the message he puts in his music, is very uncomfortable, because some of the things he talks about, is shit you don't want to believe is happening, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's part of that matrix we talk about, but at the end of the day, denying the fact that this is happening right in front of our eyes, is contributing to the problem. So I think, we need to really, like you said, come together, and keep moving forward on these political issues, keep talking about solutions, and try to keep our energy clean of the people that want to divide us so we can't find a solution.
That's so true, and I think even with, like you said, just keeping your energy towards the positivity, people also understand who is around you, who's contributing to the issue and the problem. Again, it's about accountability. We don't have it with these politicians and the people who are in the highest positions of power in this country. But damn it, again, we are the people, so we also possess the power to affect who gets in office. So again, I'm going to push the message of going to vote. I'm not in the state that I got my license right now, so I'm going to have to fill out an absentee ballot here in a couple hours and things like that, and try to make sure I get that in so that my vote matters and things like that. But again, people, go vote, do your research, do whatever you can. For the people that I know that work in politics, for the people that I know that work at these radio stations, again, we have to keep the pressure on this situation, because we lost a lot of steam. A lot of people's attention are gone. And though people are doing great jobs, the music, like you said, Daylight, and we mentioned so many other artists who are doing an amazing job. We mentioned, the basketball and football situation and stuff like that. While people are doing what they can, we still need everyone's energy placed forward. And understand that you can't argue with somebody's, one of the favorite things that I've seen is, I think it's like a meme going around, is you can't argue with a motherfucker that believe they're a lie. You know what I mean? So speak to the people that you can trust and influence change in, and we got to stick together and get things going. You cannot lose momentum with these things. Part of the reason why things have been, going on the way they have for well over, 50 plus years, even though we've had all these different riots, part of the issue is we celebrate too soon and we lose momentum with these things. So I'm encouraging you all to do your research and things like that. So real quick, wrapping this up, is there anything else you want to say to the people, and you want to promote your Instagram or anything like that again, bro?
Nah, I'm cool on the promo, man. I love for you. Thank you for having me on. Love the topics, man. It's always real. I want to encourage everybody to just, keep your head up. We live in some very negative times, and it's very easy, to put your mental health on the back burner. But remember that change comes from within. You got to be the change you want to see in the world, and you got to inspire those around you to also find their light. With that being said, man, I thank you for your time, and y'all have a good one, for real.
Man, I appreciate you coming on. It's a beautiful thing to, again, work with you, man, and have people be interested in this thing. It's only happening because you guys are invested in it the same way that I am. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing the platform with me, empowering yourself and the people, man. I'm going to put his information in the description, man. Go show my guy, Troy, some love. My bad, man. We love you guys so much. You got more content coming out soon. It's the Uncut Podcast. We love y'all, man. Peace.
Just chill and sit back, baby. Yeah. Hey, look. R.I.P. to Nando. If I find them motherfuckers, I'll be emptying my ammo. Need that type of shit that make you wanna dim the lights, blow a blunt and light a candle. I'm at a Puerto Rican beach with some Puerto Rican bitches sipping lean and Gucci sandals. I hit Vegas and blew 100K. Damn, man, mama told me not to